Ines, I will start with you. So the reception the president has received from other world leaders, describe to me sort of the sense they're on the ground and how they're feeling as this framework and the lack of details around all of it sort of hangs over this entire summit.
Yes, I mean, he's getting lots of questions here, about the deal because there's still so much we don't know about this deal. Today, President Trump met with the leaders of Qatar and the UAE privately, and you can bet that those leaders were drilling down on the details of that deal because, of course, their countries have been on the front line of this war. They were repeatedly bombed, their critical energy infrastructure wrecked. It's estimated that it's going to cost billions for them to repair that infrastructure. So, I'm curious to know if that issue would have come up in those closed-door meetings. President Trump also taking lots of questions from reporters today. I'll let you listen to what he had to say about the deal.
Here's what it says. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That's what it says. It won't have one. To buy, to develop, they will not have a nuclear weapon. And I would say that's about 99.9% of what I wanted because we couldn't let that happen. You couldn't let that happen. And they won't have a nuclear weapon. Now, in addition to that, the Strait is going to be open toll-free. And it's toll-free beyond the 60 days. It's not, somebody said, oh, it's toll-free for... No. It's toll-free, period.
So he says it's toll-free, but of course, on that point, the Iranians have suggested that actually there would be tolls that would be regulated by Iran and Oman. So we've been getting, contradicting messages there from the U.S. and from Iran. One more point you asked me about reaction from world leaders. It's worth noting that the Israelis appear to be rejecting this deal. So we heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night, who suggested that Israel isn't bound by this deal. He said that Israel would not be withdrawing from Lebanon and that the struggle continues. That could pose a real problem going forward because, of course, Iran has said that any lasting deal must involve an end to the hostilities in Lebanon as well. And President Trump earlier today did voice frustration with Netanyahu, saying that Israel needs to be more responsible when it comes to Lebanon.
Ines de la Cuatara, thanks for your reporting there in France. So, Peter, I want to go back to what we heard the president say there just before we started this entire conversation, saying that, it really hadn't crossed his mind to send this agreement to Congress, but I guess he's going to do it now that he got the idea from the reporters asking him there. How unusual is that? I mean, a couple days have now gone by since we first heard the announcement of this initial deal. Why don't we have the details?
Well, it's a very good question because the details are what really matter. And what you hear only is the president's own description of it and then contradicted, as we just said, by the Iranians' description of it. So how do we evaluate it? How does Congress evaluate it? Now, this temporary 60-day ceasefire, is not going to go to Congress. What they're talking about is the eventual deal that they imagine will be developed in these 60 days. But let's remember the history here. In 2015, when President Obama came up with his nuclear agreement with Iran, he did not send it to the Senate for ratification as a treaty. He instead framed it as an executive agreement that didn't require congressional approval. Why did he do that? Because the Senate wouldn't have approved it. So the question here is, is this president going to frame this as a treaty that goes to the Senate, which would require a 2/3 vote in the Senate, which it might or might not get, or some other sort of an agreement that would require a majority vote in both houses? Or when he says, I'm going to send it to them for review, he just simply means I'm going to send it to them so they can look at it, but I'm not going to actually ask them for permission. We don't really know the answer to that question.
Jonathan, one of the reasons this is all so confusing is because of the role that Israel and Lebanon play here. Ines referenced it just moments ago, too. And the reality is, whether people are comfortable with it or not, they like it or not, Lebanon is a front in this war. And Iran has made that very clear. In fact, they struck Israel only days ago because they felt that Israel had crossed their red line with bombings in Beirut. And so I guess I want to get your take on how peace could even be possible here if the Israelis are this early in the game already saying, nope, we're not part of it.
Well, I think we need to center the human costs here. We know in Lebanon, hundreds or thousands of civilians have been killed in Israeli strikes. 1.2 million Lebanese people have been displaced in the south. So Lebanon is definitely a front in this war. And this is a hugely costly, unnecessary war that the U.S. and Israel launched against Iran that's had, I think, really backfired against Trump. So I think we should criticize that war, but also praise President Trump and his team for getting diplomacy done. I think they deserve a lot of criticism because the strait could have been open from the get-go and could have avoided a lot of this conflict.
It was functioning before the war began.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this
with
is
no tolls.
It's a pocketbook war. I mean, this is a hugely unpopular war. 4 out of 5 Americans, according to a survey my organization, IGA, fielded, say that they're hurting economically as a result of this Israel-U.S. war in Iran. So costly, foolish, and the human cost is just tremendous. Also in Iran, where thousands of civilians have been killed.
Given, though, the dynamics here, Peter, do you think that for the leaders who are trying to speak with President Trump right now, reason with him, that they are able to even take a sigh of relief right now and trust the process? Or because of what they're hearing from Israel, the dynamics that they're watching, the contradictory statements that they're watching from figures like J.D. Vance in this administration, that they're actually preparing for the reality that they may get dragged into something messy once again?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure they're pressing for details. I'm sure they're pressing to understand this deal better. But at the same time, the Europeans are pro-diplomacy, by instinct and genetics, I think. So I think they're going to be happy that there is at least some, off-ramp to a war they never supported in the beginning. Whether the fact this deal is a good deal, whether it's as good a deal as Obama's deal, whether it just simply gets us back to the status quo antebellum before the war started, the Europeans are willing to have to go along with that if they feel like that's necessary to stop, any sort of escalation. But they're going to be paying attention to the details because the details do matter. Is this deal going to lead to an actual agreement on the nuclear program? We don't know that yet. This is simply a deal to basically stop the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which was not blockaded before the war started, and then to have more talks, which we were having before the war started, without any actual guarantee of a result that would be satisfying. So it's a very much of a up in the air kind of situation. The Europeans would much rather prefer that they at least be heading down the road of diplomacy, and so that I'm sure they're glad.
Peter, what do you think, though, of the role that J.D. Vance is playing in all of this? Not only was it, frankly, at times hard to sort of follow his argument as he went on different media programs and shows yesterday to try to get the message out there. I was left wondering, well, where is the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in all of this? Why is he out there sort of stumbling over some of what the president is also claiming in public?
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation because, of course, we remember this is a vice president who didn't support the war in the first place. He was very critical as a senator of the idea of going to war with Iran. And after this idea came up while he was vice president, we're told from reporting by our colleagues that, in fact, he objected or at least cautioned about the risks of doing so. Now, once, of course, the president made that decision, he got on board the way a loyal vice president is supposed to do. But the president seems to be using him in a way as a foil by making him the person who's going to go sign the deal, by making him the face of this deal in some ways. He is turning that opposition to the war, to the president's favor in some ways. But it also puts J.D. Vance on the hook as he looks ahead to 2028, as he looks ahead to his own future prospects as a president. He's going to own this deal to some extent, and that may or may not be something he wants to down the road, depending on how it looks after we get to some sort of eventual, more comprehensive agreement.
Yeah, Jonathan, there are some other contradictory messages that world leaders in France right now are trying to parse through from the president himself on Ukraine, saying that, now that Iran is finished, he's going to be focusing on Ukraine. But also, he said today, the war in Ukraine is not America's fight. What does that signal to you?
Well, I mean, the Ukraine conflict has been something that President Trump has been all over the place. Of course, the criticisms of Zelensky, I think, were really out of hand. But on the other hand, it's worth emphasizing this was a war that the Biden administration didn't know how to get out of. It went very far and used up a lot of U.S. weaponry. And we're now in a situation where Ukraine has become a kind of endless war. I think they're winning, but like in the context of Israel-Palestine or Iran, diplomacy is going to be the way out of that.
Are there parallels between the United States' missteps in Iran and Russia's missteps in Ukraine? Russia thought that was going to be a very quick conflict, too.
Sure. I mean, Peter's colleague has a great piece today, I think, showing that superpowers get mired in these big wars. I've been reading a lot of history about Vietnam. I don't know if it's a great idea for superpowers to get into these fights because, look, I think the United States has been handed a real loss, or at least a draw, in the context of Iran. It's embarrassing. It saps U.S. credibility. But as I say, we should praise the diplomacy here because diplomacy in politics is how you get out of wars.